Hello, everyone. This is the Exploring the Bible Dickinson series, Volume 2, Introducing the Old Testament. We are on session 3, entitled Laying Down the Law. It is April the 6th, and it's a pleasure to see all of you here this evening. Our opening devotion is taken from Psalm 14. And it is a psalm written to the leader of David. Psalm 14. Fools say in their hearts, there is no God. They are corrupt. They do abominable deeds. There is no one who does good. The Lord looks down from heaven on humankind to see if there are any who are wise, who seek after God. They have all gone astray. They are all alike perverse. There is no one who does good. No, not one. Have they no knowledge? All the evildoers who eat up my people as they eat bread and do not call upon the Lord. There they shall be in great terror, for God is with the company of the righteous. You would confound the plans of the poor, but the Lord is their refuge. Oh, that deliverance from Israel would come from Zion, when the people restores the fortune of his people. When the Lord restores the fortunes of his people, Jacob will rejoice. Israel will be glad. I picked that particular psalm because we are entering into the law of God, the giving of the commandments, and entering into the book of Judges, which the book of Judges is an interesting book because you've got the Israelites and they kind of keep doing wrong, and then the judge comes along and they do right. The judge goes away and people do wrong again. And there's this huge cyclical pattern of righteousness and doing evil. And so I thought this psalm was kind of an interesting juxtaposition of, what we are called to do as humanity. And so I just thought it's one that we don't read very often, and thought it would be a nice different change of pace.
It starts out a real downer, don't it?
What's that?
It starts out a little downer.
It starts out as a little bit of a downer, yes. I I do admit that. So I do want to just kind of check in. I'll share the screen real quick. Everyone doing well? Oops.
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Any real quick, any thing from the reading that has jumped out to you? And we'll come back to that, obviously.
What was it? What was the lesson too? I read.
So the lesson for today was reading pages 49
72
through 57.
Not the whole chapter, George.
Yeah, I mean, you can read the whole chapter.
Yeah, but I just want
but specifically 49 through 57.
notes.
And I have that on the screen as well for those of you at home. So I do not see anybody speak, so we will. Oh, Lori, I'm sorry.
Well, what jumped out at me was I didn't realize that Deborah was a military leader, and surprised that a woman would be in that position in that day and time.
Right. Yeah.
It was a big enough shock that she's a judge, but then to be a military leader also was, I don't really understand that.
Hopefully we'll be able to explore some of that in depth in a little bit. So today we are going to look to recognize the role of women in some of the Old Testament passages. Lori lifted up Deborah in the book of Judges. And we will be reading from Exodus, Joshua, and Judges, looking at the student guide, pages 49 to 57. And then when we return on May the 11th, we will be looking at the 10 Commandments and the 2 different versions. And I will have the scriptures for those on the homework slide at the end of the presentation. And we'll finish out that chapter for chapter 3. Then next session, our objectives will be to examine the 10 Commandments in light of contemporary morality. And then if we have time, hopefully, to explore the practices of Jubilee and whether or not it has contemporary significance. So that will be our goal for these 2 sessions on this session 3, chapter 3. This is a tweet that went out last year. April 4th, 2021 was Easter. And Tyler Huckabee tweeted, "A special shout out to all the women who preached the Easter message in their churches today. Literally the oldest Christian tradition there is." And so I had a very controversial question last week for the homework. Does anybody remember what that question was?
Yeah, reading through the eyes of women, would it make any difference?
Reading through the eyes of women in the Bible doesn't make any difference. So let's unpack that question just for a moment, especially in light of our readings for today. We have a number of women who had significant parts in some fairly one particular story that is familiar, and the other 2 may or may not be as familiar, but they're very big stories in the light of the Israelite people. So can we read the Bible through the eyes of women, and can we do so without approaching the Bible through the eyes of women? And it's a loaded question, so what are any thoughts on that?
History moves a lot slower
Okay,
than we want it to.
what do you mean by that?
Well, whether it do a lot of controversial issues that we deal with, women's roles in everything, especially religion. You know, we do the thing to note here that we do have stories, significant stories of women, and we could list those. Ruth one, you know, we talk about them, but it just takes history 1,000 years to catch up with where we are now, especially with the role of women. And it's been tried, but it's just a slow process. It's kind of like dealing with racism and slavery. It's a very slow process, much slower than we would want it to be.
So why do you think history moves so slow to catch up with what I presume you're saying is where humanity is today?
Dominant role of male in anything, even in the animal world.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Not just with humans.
Okay,
Yeah.
Okay. Any comments or thoughts about that? Are you all hearing okay?
Yeah, I think part of it is the Bible was written through the eyes of the patriarchy. I mean, so it's not no wonder that women's roles kind of were downplayed or not very well known throughout the years.
Can I push back on that for a second?
No.
No, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, so you're suggesting that the patriarchy has written the Bible and that they have relegated the role of women to a less than ideal spot. And yet we've read 3 very specific stories that I think would argue against your statement.
Oh, yeah, but just think how many more stories there would have been.
Well, I wonder if it's not so much the writers as it is history, as George was getting at.
Well,
And it's not just religion, it's other issues.
Right.
It's cultural as well.
Right, right.
Sorry,
And,
Bob.
I was gonna say, we know that the Catholic Church subjugated the stories of women. That
Sure.
when the
Mhm.
Christian church began, women were much more prominent. And as soon as the Catholic Church took over, they got rid of many of those stories.
And there's plenty of stories in the Old Testament that show women leaders as well,
right,
like in an active teaching role.
right.
So
Of course, we're not talking about Christ, but some people would say Christ was the first culturally, historically, women's liberator.
Hmm.
I mean, there's certain stories he
Right.
dealt with.
Yeah.
And the first Christians, there was a book of Mary.
Hmm.
There were several books named after
Mhm.
women, but as you say, they were held down by the
well,
church hierarchy.
some of those books were also fanciful.
Very
Well,
yeah,
you're right.
questionable.
Yeah,
No,
That's why they weren't in the canon.
a little bit.
well, yeah.
All right. So I just wanted to at least acknowledge that the role of women in the Bible, and as we've mentioned, even in history, has certainly not been without controversy. And I don't mean that that women are controversial, but more just in terms of that there's always been controversy surrounding what the role of women is and ought to be. So without putting my foot any further in my mouth, are there any other comments or statements to be made about this particular, whether it's just the tweet or just in general, the topic of women and their roles before we get into the actual scriptures? We've heard from a lot of guys. Any of the ladies want to chime in?
Well, I guess we're going to talk about Exodus 1 and then verse 15, which I enjoyed. The king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, you know, if any boys are born, kill them. And then the Hebrew midwives did exactly the opposite. So
Right.
I thought that was cool.
Somebody say typical.
I don't think they, pardon? Oh, typical, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So
I don't
that-
think they were actually punished by the king, were they? It didn't say that, I don't think.
Well, the midwives said that they got there too late, so they couldn't,
Ah,
couldn't
yeah,
kill them,
yeah,
so
they
they-
made up a story too.
they fibbed a bit.
Well, no, I think what Jenny was asking was if the actual midwives got punished.
That's what I'm saying. They,
Oh, I'm
they,
sorry.
I think I recall that they reported back to the king and the king said, you know, why are so many boys being born? They said, well, they just give birth too
Yeah, they
fast.
told
We
a
can't
lie.
get there in time.
Right.
Is I think what they said.
So anyone want to take a stab at naming the women that are in chapter 1, verse 8 through chapter 2, verse 10 in the story of Egypt and Moses?
Shipra and Puah.
Shipra and Puah. Are there any other women that are named?
In just the first chapter?
So it would be chapter
1, 2,
1,
and
verse
10.
8 through chapter 2, verse 10.
No, I don't see any.
Well,
So-
depending on the translation, you might get Moses' sister, maybe.
Who was Miriam?
That was Moses' sister.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not in this one.
So we have Moses' sister. She's not named until a little later.
Right.
We do have the Levite woman. We have the Egyptian women. We have the daughter of Pharaoh. And I believe the man's sister would be Miriam. That would be Moses. No, that would
No.
be, shoot, that was,
His sister.
Dan's sister was. I marked that as chapter 2, verse 4, so that was. Okay, so that would be, so in chapter 2, verse 1, we have a man from the house of Levi married to a Levite woman. So that man, his sister is identified in verse 4. So it would be the aunt of Moses on his father's side. Did you all catch that?
No, I
Jenny,
I
you
thought that
were-
the baby's older sister Miriam was the one who found him in chapter 2, verse 4.
My translation does not have her named, so I'm trying.
Oh,
to-
mine doesn't have the name either, but it says the baby's older sister found herself a vantage point and watched to see what would happen to him.
I mean, yeah,
Oh, I see it. I have it down in the commentary. It is introduced as Aaron's sister in chapter 15 and cited as Moses' sister in Numbers 26. So that would be Miriam. Okay, thank you. So when we get into those unnamed people, it does get a little confusing about who they are talking about. So, we certainly have the two named, Shipra and Pua. What are their, who are they and what are their roles?
They're Hebrew midwives.
The Hebrew midwives, correct, yes. Okay, and what is their contribution to this story in Exodus? Excuse me.
What,
They,
how do you
they
spell-
help save the babies,
Boy babies.
boy babies.
They're saving the boy babies. What was the question?
how do you spell the second, not Miriam, the second one's name?
Pua,
Yeah.
P-U-A-H. She's named in my translation,
Midwives. Hebrews.
I have her named verse 15 in chapter 1. Did you find it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, all right,
She's in Judges as well.
Yeah.
Pua.
okay.
And she was a midwife.
Both of the Shipra and Pua were both, yes, yeah, so they were both Hebrew midwives, yes. Okay, any other thoughts or comments about the role of the women in general? So there's a lot of things happening in this particular chapter. What role does Miriam or the unnamed sister, but what is her role in this story?
She's watching the baby, and then when the Pharaoh's sister comes, she comes out to offer somebody to nurse him.
Right, so she offers a midwife.
No.
Yeah. Or not a midwife, but basically a
nurse.
wet nurse. Yeah.
Yeah,
wet
wet
nurse, yep.
nurse.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Did it, I thought,
Well, is the wet nurse actually Moses's mother?
it is, yes,
Yeah.
so, yes. What about the, I'm trying to think, we got the named women, we got the sister, and certainly the daughter of Pharaoh, has a role in this as well. And what is her role in this?
She became the mother.
She became what?
Didn't she become the mother?
She did, yes, I'm sorry, yes. It's about 3 or 4 years later, I think. Just says when the child grew, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter and she took him in as her son. in chapter 2, verse 10, excuse me. So, yeah. Okay, any other thoughts or comments or questions about this story of Egypt and Moses and all of the women that are involved?
I think if the Hebrews are so numerous that the Egyptians are afraid of them, they needed a lot more than 2 midwives.
Yeah, that is, I never thought about that. That's an interesting observation. So
What was that statement?
she said that the Egyptians were so afraid of the Hebrews that they needed 2 midwives.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
They needed more than 2.
That
Yeah,
wasn't-
I think, yeah, I have, a-
Possibly there were more, and the other ones obeyed the Pharaoh, and these 2 particular ones did not.
That's true. Yes.
Could be. Although the numbers are the population numbers given later in Exodus are probably a little bit inflated.
Yeah. Yeah, that is one of the things that if you talk to historical scholars, the numbers never seem to match up with the population of that time period. So that's one of the challenges with these types of stories, is how much of it has been added on to and how much of it is factual. So yeah. So we will move on to Joshua, and there are 2 separate verses in here. So Joshua chapter 2, the first 24 verses, and then again it picks up in chapter 6, verses 22 to 25.
No, we didn't do that.
So does anyone have the name of the woman or women that are involved in this particular story?
Rahab.
We have Rahab, thank you.
Yeah.
And what is her role?
She hides the spies.
She what?
No, I'm wrong.
Oh, okay.
well, she was a prostitute.
Mhm.
She is a prostitute, lady of the night.
And I find it interesting that that's where they went to spend the night.
Mhm.
That is, yes.
My translation says, or possibly an innkeeper.
Okay.
For 2:1.
Verse 2:1.
Yes.
That's
They
the
would enter the
Hebrew.
house of the innkeeper or prostitute. Those are the 2 options.
Maybe your
I see.
version is trying to sanitize it a little bit.
Well, I mean, there are different. It is hard going back to the original text too. I mean, sometimes, innkeeper could only be like 1 or 2 vowels different than prostitute,
Sure, I understand.
Or translations are interesting, and so who knows? I mean, yeah.
My commentary suggests that Rahab is a legally independent woman with her own house. The nature of her business means that the presence of strangers would not be questioned, whether she was a prostitute or even as an inn. That the visitation of strangers at that time of night would not raise any alarms or cause concern with the neighbors. So any other thoughts or comments about who Rahab is or what her role is?
Do we have any history about her before she?
There are 2. She does reappear in the New Testament. She is named as being among the ancestors of Jesus in Matthew's genealogy.
Really?
Chapter 1, verse 5. And she is named in Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, as an example of living the faith. And she is also referenced in James chapter 2 for being justified by her works.
Hmm.
So she does reappear in the New Testament.
I think it,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I think it speaks volumes that this story is told, and I don't know, most translations, I think, probably have prostitute.
Mhm.
But this story is told about a prostitute helping the men, and it's part of the foundation of the Hebrew people.
Mhm.
I think that speaks volumes, the fact that this story is still there.
Right. Yeah. Does she have any other roles other than being a prostitute and or an innkeeper?
Well, she helped them escape. I mean, she
Yeah.
orchestrated their escape.
Okay,
I mean, it gives the Bible, it's great detail. She lowered them down on a rope. I
Mhm.
mean, because her house was against the city wall or something of that nature. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, it's a lot of detailed information there about
Mhm.
specifically what she did.
I mean,
okay,
later on, she joins the Israelites when they, after it's destroyed.
right. So in chapter 6, she and her family are brought out of
What's that? I was looking.
the city. So that's found in chapter 6. But she actually does have another job. So
Yeah.
if you look at verses 6 and 7,
It's this one.
We're still in
yeah.
chapter 2.
yes, still on chapter 2.
Do you have some source of income related to flax? Does she weave it or something?
Yes, so flax probably would have been you think about flax seed, so it could be used for a number of different uses. So she would have been spreading it out on her rooftop to dry it out for some use. So you can use flax seed to make flour. I think it can be used for clothing, but I'm not 100%.
Linen is made from flax.
You can weave it, and since it was in bundles, it almost makes it sound like she was going to be weaving it.
Right.
Hmm.
So she's definitely an entrepreneur. So having multiple sources of revenue or income.
Back
So-
then, no one was really truly that diversified,
Right.
everyone had lots of different irons in the fire because I'm guessing most people couldn't get by doing just one thing. Everyone kind of grew their own food and
Right.
worked otherwise besides their main job.
Right.
So.
Well, she also tells how she re-emphasized the story of the parting of the Red Sea when they escaped. She says, we've heard how the sea was parted so you could escape. So I think that's an interesting,
Right.
she's kind of retelling the story
Right.
too, when she's talking with them.
Mhm. Yeah. So definitely knowledgeable about what's going on, what has happened and transpired up to this point. And she even, I find it interesting. I'm looking to see the reference real quick. In verse 9 and 11, she does refer and goes back to the separation of the sea, but she does refer to God as the Lord. And so that she,
Now, are we assuming she's a Hebrew?
we are
She's
assuming that she would be
Rahab was a Canaanite.
would that be Cain? I'm trying to think.
Yeah, that area would be Canaanite.
Right, okay, thank you.
Oh, okay.
I was
So
trying-
she was a foreigner then.
She would have been a
Well,
foreigner.
okay.
is
To be
the
fair,
speculation.
the Israelites are kind of a subset of the Canaanites. They're all kind of Western Asiatic,
Mhm.
Semitic. That's what I'm looking for.
Right,
They're all branches of this. They're closely related ethnicities, I guess would be the right term.
but she probably would have identified as a Canaanite, Canaanite, excuse me. So. Any other thoughts or comments? And she certainly contributed to the story by allowing the spies to come in, stay at her place, and helping them escape. And then she later on, she joined the Israelites just prior to the destruction of the city, and continued to live out her life amongst them, even to the point of being identified by name in the genealogy of Jesus and the Gospel of Matthew.
I find this fascinating that it's even in the Bible. You know, here's a woman who was a prostitute,
Mhm.
but she was really smart, and I'm getting the feeling that there's a backstory that she's probably helped a lot of people before. It's almost like she has a cover or something. I don't know.
Underground Railroad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. She just seems different. We haven't heard of a whole lot of women like that. If they're prostitutes, they're just prostitutes, and that's all you hear, and they're shunned. But
Well,
I don't know. She seems to get along very well, and
She became a convert to the Hebrew people.
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah, she became a convert.
later on, yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
from what it sounds like,
Yeah.
back in Exodus, when
Damn.
so a lot of Egyptians left with them. But at that time, you might have had a people in charge who weren't actually Egyptians ethnically, they just called them Egyptians. Which if the Hyksos were in power, they were Semitic too.
Oh, bad word. Oh, wow.
Which would explain why Moses was adopted so easily, because they were basically very closely, unrelated, ethnicities. So there was probably some interplay between the two.
Yeah.
So,
Interesting.
I guess.
No supper tonight?
so it seems to me like a lot of the tribal things between like the Israelites and others were kind of more like constructs than actual
Right.
true ethnic differences.
Which kind of goes back to what the author was talking about in terms of with the idea in I think it was chapter 1, she was talking about the family unit, and then how as the world got bigger and bigger, the idea and notion of who's part of your tribe, who's part of your family has continued to broaden. So that theme has continued even through into, well, our story today. She clearly, Rahab and her family clearly were welcomed into in a formal way, I think,
Yeah.
an official way into the Israelite community of faith and people. So,
And I think something else we can emphasize, let's take a Bible lesson like this 50 years ago.
Hmm.
Would the convener, the pastor, or whoever, would they have lifted up these women? We do today, but my grandfather was a preacher 100 years ago. Would he have lifted up these women's role in the scriptures? I would say not, but I don't know.
right.
Yeah.
Rahab, he probably would have said, redeemed herself through her actions because she feared God.
If he would have taught, I think what George is getting at.
In
if
Bible
he
teaching,
even
like
would
a
have,
lesson
right.
like
They
this,
wouldn't even talk about
even in the pulpit,
Right.
would this woman have even been mentioned in a sermon?
Right.
I would say probably
it. I
not.
would say.
Probably not, yeah.
So we're doing something new historically speaking.
Well, we are, yeah.
I mean,
Hey,
it definitely wasn't forgotten, so it was definitely significant to the Israelites too,
right.
that this event had occurred. And
But George, we don't know if it's new because back in the early days of the church, they paid a lot more attention to women. So we might be
Right,
revisiting that.
come out in Jesus,
Yeah.
2,000
Right,
years
right,
ago. Yeah,
right.
that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It probably took a step backwards somewhere
Yes.
around 500 AD or
well, it's
600 AD.
there's a lot of step backs and a lot of step forwards. It's always interesting looking back and seeing how before Victorian area was much less tight laced than it even, in some regards, even today still.
Right.
And so before that, that might not have been such a shameful. Well, Rahab being a prostitute might not have been so unusual, so or frowned upon, or so.
I know I'm jumping ahead, but
Yeah.
I
Oh,
love
no,
the
yeah.
story of African-American women. Harriet Tubman, for example, we cover that later in the lesson.
Right.
But there were women and their role in the Underground Railroad and, alleviating slavery.
Right.
you know, they definitely was, these stories really spoke to them.
Right, yeah, yeah. Which goes back, I mean, and it also kind of calls into question, can Christians, can white Christians in particular, really look at these passages in the way that they're intended to be in terms of restoration or even reconciliation? Because we have been in positions of power for so long, can we really place ourselves in the role of the Israelites or Rahab, or are we usually the antagonist in the story?
The book 1619, the 1619 project,
Yeah,
she really lifts up women's role, how the traditional church has held down women.
Right.
If you read that part of that book, really, she really lifts that up.
right.
I don't know if she mentioned that the other night in Lynchburg. I don't remember. I couldn't hear very well.
I think she hinted at it. I don't think she spent a lot of time on it. I'm not sure I could, she talked about a lot.
Yeah.
But I don't think she spent a lot of time on that
No.
piece of it. Yeah.
So I just want to mention something. So I think I definitely can relate to kind of so in the past, way in the past, so it's been a long time, not in my lifetime, but Mennonites were very heavily persecuted when it first started. I mean, they were flat out murdered because they didn't do infant baptism and did
Come out
adult
of Europe.
baptism. Yeah, and
Switzerland. Yeah.
that,
Yeah, I've been to the caves where they hid.
yeah, so that, and that in terms of like farther off, yeah, but even in World War I and II, conscientious objectors were basically tortured.
Right.
Yeah.
And and belittled and, so, I mean, from my Mennonite perspective, I can,
Right. Yeah.
but that's obviously long in the past.
Right.
So,
Well, then, I mean, it is in the past, but it is also part of our story.
yeah,
And I would suggest that the notion of restoration for the Anabaptist faith traditions has possibly occurred. So the long-term ramifications of those wrongs that were done have already been righted, and maybe not. I'd be
no,
curious,
I'm
yeah.
just saying it's
Right. But it is part of the
sort of a
story.
possible analog in the past.
Right, right,
That's
yeah.
that's
Well,
what
it'd
I
be
meant. I
interesting
wasn't
to
saying
hear
it the same.
women's stories, say a woman that aspired to be a minister in the 1940s or 30s
Mm.
or 50s. It would be interesting to hear their stories of the seminaries, the educational,
Yeah.
what they had to endure.
Eric, what was the name of the traveling male minister whose wife basically was the speaker, that people came to hear her, not him? It was the Church of the Brethren.
Yeah.
Major,
You're not talking about Maddie Dolby, are you?
Maybe. That sounds right.
That's who I'm thinking it might be. Yeah.
Wendy, I saw you on mute.
Yeah, are you thinking Anna Mao?
No, it's before Anna.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, but Anna was definitely a prophetess in her own right, but yeah. I think it might have been Maddie Dolby, Kevin. I'm not 100% sure though.
That sounds right, but I'm not either. But so they were a husband and wife, itinerant
Like evangelist.
evangelist. Thank you. Thank you. And he would be who people would invite, but she would actually be the one that was actually giving the messages. She was much more prophetic and charismatic than he was. So that was one way for them to kind of get around, and everybody knew. I mean, it wasn't like it was a secret, but you still had to invite him, not her. And I'll have to double check that. Just kind of prompted when you lifted that up, but and I think, I mean, I would think even today, I mean, there's still some. I was talking with a Disciples of Christ pastor yesterday, and he was talking about how they're also a congregational based denomination, they still have the same issues we have. You know, some women are not welcome in leadership roles in specific congregations, even though they've been acknowledging women as ministers probably 50 years before we did. I think they were in the early 1900s when they formally allowed women to receive ordination. So it's still, history moves slow, I think is our
Slow.
theme for tonight.
So, quick
so,
question,
yeah.
sorry,
No,
because I don't know the answer. Back during the Protestant Anabaptist kind of origins,
Okay.
were there women like teachers then or not? Since there was kind of like a temporary rebirth and then,
Not many. You're talking about the brethren.
I
well,
think he's
or just
talking-
Anabaptists in
Anabaptists.
general.
I don't think there were.
I mean,
I mean,
I'm
there-
not sure. Yeah,
Some emerged, but they certainly were
'Cause that
not
was-
prominent.
Because back around the Protestant, formation, there was a
Right.
lot of kind of overthrow of the old rules, and a lot of them were reinforced again
right.
further down the road. Just curious, it's not, I was just curious how new.
I
off the top
I
of their
think,
head.
I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn because I'm trying to remember part of that. I mean, you have the seven, we have the seven brethren and sisters who baptized each other. I think they were all considered equal. And
Yeah.
that they were all considered equal. So nobody knows who baptized
Who?
Alexander Mack. It could have been a woman. So in that regard, there would have been a sense of equality among those seven.
Okay.
But as far as like writings and things of that nature, teaching, I think there are stories. How much of it we have
Mhm.
is been lost because I mean the persecution was very real.
Yeah.
Even for the brethren, the Moravians and the Mennonites. That whole European.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah. No, that's a
Since things seem to be kind of cyclical, I was
Right.
just wondering if it ever got to the point when there were women, where there were women preachers in the
Yeah.
past between the formation of a church and the present kind
right.
of.
Right. I'm sure there were. I know
Yeah.
in some of the history books I read in seminary, it just felt like there were a lot of masculine names.
Oh,
but,
yeah, yeah.
And that was,
Oh, yeah.
13
And that
years
was
ago.
probably part of the influence of the Catholic Church and the Roman Empire.
Well, and they were also breaking out of that too. So I think they
Yeah.
were trying to figure out, printing Bibles and getting them in their own language,
Yeah.
whether it's baptizing,
Oh, yeah.
that whole notion of the state church.
Yeah.
Yeah. So all of that was just kind of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I always wonder if it was the Roman Empire or the Catholic Church that kind of cracks down on women teachers. I guess it doesn't matter too much. Sorry, I'm getting us off topic.
no. I mean, we are talking about the role of women, so I don't think we're off topic. I think
Okay.
I'm not sure if it would be
Interesting research.
the Roman Empire. I'm not sure if there would have been.
I mean, Roman Christians.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
once Christianity became the national religion of Rome, it would be
Right.
structured then.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that women had a role. I mean, certainly,
yeah,
the quote, I mean,
Constantine's mother was very influential.
Oh, yeah, but
right.
but she
Well,
was,
right. That's true. Yeah.
but I wouldn't say that she was
didn't she
ever a
wasn't-
teacher,
no.
like some of the early women of the church were.
Right. Well, I've also heard stories where women were allowed to teach boys up to a certain age, and then once they reached a certain age, then the men had to be the teacher of the Sunday school
Yeah.
class. So there is that in part of our history as well.
That's kind of like a hierarchy of
Right. Yeah.
being
You know,
enforced.
something kind of unusual about women's roles. I'm sure we all familiar with what the charismatic movement, the holiness, Pentecostalism, and
Right.
so forth. They never had any prohibitions against women preaching, women leadership. I think that's a kind of an interesting
That
part
is.
of them.
Yeah.
Even from back the turn of the last century, they had women preachers and leaders.
Yeah. I hope we're not neglecting everyone
I was gonna say
online.
that
Any other
many
comments
people
or
don't
thoughts?
participate much.
We're just
Um,
too.
Yeah, what time is it? Oh, okay. Any other thoughts or comments about women and their role? So we're gonna skip real quick to judges. thought I had it marked, lost it. I actually did an entire summer only on the Book of Judges. And that was an interesting exercise. If you ever have the chance and want to challenge yourself, try reading it in one session.
Sitting.
One sitting, thank you. Good word, thank you. Reading the Book of Judges in one sitting. Because it is, as I mentioned a little earlier, it is a cyclical, and so you're just kind of like slogging through all of these things. It's also one of the books that I think would make an incredible number of movies. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in here, things that would shock some of the younger generations who maybe are not as familiar with these stories. You have sword fights, you've got womenizing and all other good.
Samson and Delilah is in Judges, right?
Delilah is
Am
Samson and Delilah, yes,
Yeah, okay.
yes. Sorry, so which has been made into a really
Movie,
campy
yeah.
movie, but. So we have the Israelites again have done what was evil in the sight of the Lord after Judge Ehud died. So the Lord sold them into the hand of King Jabin of Canaan, who reigned and had his army. His commander was Sisera. And I'm not going to try and pronounce that location, but so we do continue to find another woman. We've identified her earlier as Deborah. Anyone want to take a stab at what her role was?
Deborah is in Judges.
She's a prophetess.
Judges chapter 4, yeah.
Yeah.
She's a prophetess.
A prophetess, yes. Anything else?
Well, Lori alluded to it earlier, that she was like a military leader, commander.
She was identified as a judge, yes.
Mhm.
Chuck? Oh, I thought you unmuted, sorry, okay.
I was going to give Lori a chance to speak if she wanted to add anything.
No,
Okay,
Speak, Lori.
already said,
okay,
She held court.
yeah, she did.
Hmm.
And so what would be her contribution to this story between Deborah and Barak?
Well, she kind of comes up with a strategy of how to defeat the enemy and leads the enemy into the hands of the Israelites so that they can win and defeat.
and kill every one of them.
Yep.
No, I mean, you're right. I mean, this is a very violent book with a lot of fighting, a lot of how many 20? No, I was looking for the numbers of 10,000 from the tribe of Naphtali and the tribe of Zebulun. I was trying to find the number of chariots. The
Chariots.
chariots.
900.
Chariots.
Oh, there you go. Thank you. That's, I mean, that's a lot. I mean, it doesn't seem like a lot, but that's a lot of hardware.
A lot of horses.
A lot of horses, would that be correct? Because I would be curious, most of them probably were more than one horse would be pulling the chariots.
Yeah,
Any other thoughts or comments about her role in the Book of Judges?
Well, Barak said he would, if she didn't go, he wasn't going.
Yep.
So he put all the pressure on the woman to do it. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess there's another woman. And that's Jael. Is that how you pronounce it?
Jael,
Jael.
Where do you see that?
Jael.
Who drove the
She-
tent peg through the guy's heart?
That,
So we're talking about.
head.
Head.
Kind of graphic.
Through his temple, dead.
right. Yeah,
Yeah, verse 17, 18 down.
Mhm.
assassinated him in his
Well,
sleep.
through his temple,
Yep,
drove,
Yeah.
stuck a tent peg through his head.
yep.
Yeah.
I would say jail would, either of those would be appropriate pronunciations. And my commentary on that particular piece says that a woman hammering a tent peg would have been routine. So her role would have been to drive the tent pegs into the ground as part of her work for the encampment. So
That was some hard ground.
it would have been. It would have been, that is correct, yes. So,
And the Bible I have has a song of Deborah.
the song of Deborah, yeah.
It says, blessed are the woman of Jael, the wife of, most blessed of tent dwelling women.
Mhm.
Tent dwelling women.
So,
I'd like to read what my Bible commentary has to say about this Jael and Sisera.
okay,
Jael, another woman, also plays a key role. Like Deborah, the text honors her in the most exalted terms, most blessed of women. Unfortunately, commentators have often accused Jael of violating the spiritual discipline of hospitality in her dealings with Sisera. But this is entirely unfair. Well, yeah, if you drive a tent peg through a guy's head, that's definitely not hospitality. But it goes on to say it is actually Sisera who violates the code of hospitality by making demands upon Jael, his host, and by requesting her to lie, alerting Jael to his evil intent. In other words, stand at the entrance of the tent, and when somebody asks, oh, no, ain't nobody else here. In particular, the possibility that Sisera would rape her. See the note on 5:28:31. Accordingly, the narrator clearly indicates that Jael's killing of Sisera is self-defense and indeed is nothing short of God's own work. Like Deborah, Jael is God's agent in battling an oppressor. I find that very interesting.
Mhm.
Don't mess around with Jael.
28:31.
Most blessed of women.
Yeah, most blessed of women.
yeah,
Two maidens for every warrior.
so we are reaching towards the end of our time. And I want to give anyone an opportunity, if there was anything they read in the pages of the first half of the session 3 book. If there was anything you wanted to call attention to or lift up, and then I'll discuss the homework and relay out the plan for the next couple of weeks. And while you're all looking, does anybody know who broke all of the 10 commandments in the Bible? There's only one person in the entire Bible who broke all 10 commandments.
I know.
Yeah, I think you've told this joke before.
You want me to tell you?
Yes.
Yeah,
Moses.
Who?
Moses.
Yeah.
When he slammed down the tablets, they all broke.
Oh,
But it wasn't his fault.
God made him do it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that you remembered it, Wendy. Thank you.
The
Yeah.
devil made him do it. The devil made him do it.
Oh, they made. All so we will gather again for the Bible study on May the 11th. Our homework is to read the remainder of chapter 3, which is pages 49 to 57. There are two versions of the Ten Commandments. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11, and Deuteronomy chapter 5, verses 12 through 15. I'm going to try and break up the session so that we can talk about the two commandments, or the two versions of the Ten Commandments, and the Jubilee, which is found in Leviticus chapter 25, verses 8 through 13. And just a reminder that next week is Holy Week, so we will not be meeting for Bible study. I encourage you to, if you're able to attend the ecumenical Holy Week services being held at Mount Zion Church, Mount Zion AME Church. Following week, we'll be on vacation. And then the following week, I will be in Seattle. And then on May the 4th, International Star Wars Appreciation Day, the Nurture team is hosting a Wednesday night meal at 5:30. They're still working out a couple of details about that, but we are hoping to just have a meal and fellowship time. And they will also be having some questions and discussion about upcoming Nurture activities, as well as what the congregation and you all would like to see with Wednesday night fellowship resuming in the fall. So they are looking for some input, feedback, and there will be some things coming out about that as well. Then we will resume the following week on May the 11th at a regular time, 6 p.m. for the Bible study, and we will do session 3, part 2. Any questions about anything I've just said? And all of that will be sent out in an email with specific dates, so we are all on the same page.
Cameron,
Chuck?
just a clarification, the rest of chapter 3 would be 58 through 70, I think.
Did I put that down wrong?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's not a big deal, but it's the 58 through 70.
You're right. Thank you, Chuck.
What was
Yes.
that?
Okay, so we will be reading, okay, I thought I changed that. So yes, the second part of session 3 is page 58 through 70, yes. And so you'll see Harriet Tubman, the Ark, the crown of Pharaoh, the tabernacle diagram, as well as the Ten Commandments and Moses.
Hey,
Thank you
Kevin,
just for clarifying that. I'll make sure I correct that. Yes, Eric.
I know we reconvene on May the 11th. How long do we go with this study then? What's the concluding week? Is it the last Wednesday of May?
Let me double check that because I did write that down in my calendar. Make sure I get it right here. So let me check through, make sure I have it right. Try to find
It would be the last week in May 2023.
Yes, no. My goal is to have everything done by June the 15th.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I know that pushes us out a little bit into the summer. And it's just one of those things, trying to compile these chapters into one session is just, it's way too much information. So, and I appreciate all of your patience and participation in that. So. If there are no other questions, I give you all a blessing of peace and farewell. And don't get God upset that he will send the army of 10,000 after you. Yes, Wendy.
So just a reminder that tomorrow evening at 6:30, the witness team is doing a prayer walk around our church neighborhood. So if you have not joined us before and you're available at 6:30 and hopefully without rain, come join us. We won't walk more than about half an hour. And if you can't join us tomorrow, then look for the next prayer walk next week.
Thank you, Wendy.
What do
And
you
I
do?
also,
Oh.
sorry, I would also like to share, because I've learned this through many of the students that I teach. The Muslims started celebrating Ramadan this past weekend on Friday evening sunset.
Mhm,
And that lasts for about 30 days until the next moon phase of that small crescent moon.
mhm.
And just keep those folks in our thoughts and consideration. I have students who will eat tonight, probably around 8:30 or 9 p.m.
Right.
and they will not eat again
Mhm.
until 8:30, 9 p.m. tomorrow night. Not
Right.
even water,
Right.
not even water, unless they're elderly, pregnant, or
Mhm.
sick. They are very astute to follow this, and they ask to pray in my room. And I mean, it's really tough for me to imagine not eating for every day
Right.
in front of all your peers and all the food that you smell wafting through the cafeteria of the school. I mean, it really makes us realize what a good prayerful practice they follow. So
Yes.
if we could get together and walk tomorrow night and pray around the neighborhood, that's a small thing to ask, I guess.
Thank you for sharing that, Wendy. Ginny West, did you have a question?
No, that's okay about the walking. That's okay.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Okay, all right. Well, everyone have a wonderful evening. I look forward to seeing you sometime between now and Sunday. Don't forget, Sunday is Palm Sunday. We are excited to have palms. We're working on flowers, so we will update you all on that. Jenny, I'll give you a call later about that.
Bye,
So-
Jenny. Me, Jenny.
You, Jenny.
Waring, I will give you a call about that.
Well, I was getting ready to go in a moment to Lowe's and pick up lilies.
Oh, okay, all right. If you're willing to do that and want to do that, that's perfect.
So I'll be calling on George and Jared to help me carry in boxes of books and 16 flowers or something.
Okay, all right, sounds good. Thank you, Waring.
Yeah.
All right, have a good night, everyone.
Bye. Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
What is she gonna